Hello everybody, and welcome back to the channel. While I did state that my next 3 videos would be a Transformers video, 255 Nights at Freddy's Facts, and Ideas for Special Delivery Mechanics, Part 2, I have actually come up with an original idea for a 5 Nights at Freddy's video, which I would like to quickly make before somebody else beats me to it. Rest assured, this will be the only interruption to my promised schedule, which will resume after this video has been finished. Now, on to the subject of this video, something that I rarely see anybody discuss about the 5 Nights at Freddy's series is its soundtracks. Originally, the series only used edited stock music from royalty-free sources, such as shockwavesound.com. However, that would change with 2016's 5 Nights at Freddy's World. In addition to introducing voice acting, World was also the first 5 Nights at Freddy's game to receive its own OST, scored by composer Leon Riskin, who would go on to score every single game until Ultimate Custom Night. While Help Wanted did reuse a majority of the series' music, it did receive a few new music tracks, composed by Alan Simpson, while Special Delivery had an entirely original soundtrack. Perhaps due to its unoriginal beginnings, I rarely see people discuss the music in most of the 5 Nights at Freddy's games, which is honestly quite a shame, because I think that this series has some fantastic music, in terms of both original compositions and reused stock tracks. For this video, I would like to cover my top 10 favorite music tracks in the 5 Nights at Freddy's series. However, before this list begins, I would like to clarify a few things. First of all, both stock music from the original quadrilogy and original music from the later games are eligible for this list, as well as multiple music tracks from a single game. Secondly, in order to appease the crowd who would have preferred for me to just play the music and not have narration over it, I have included links to every piece of music used for this video in the description. However, they are organized by game, as to not spoil the order of this list. Thirdly, I would like to clarify that I am unfortunately not an expert on music in the slightest, so I will be unable to go in depth and break down the music's mechanics. Instead, I will just explain my opinions on the music, how well it establishes the tone of its scene or game, and how well it adds to the atmosphere. However, this may also result in this video being much shorter than my videos typically are. Finally, as always, this list is based entirely on my own opinions, but feel free to share your own opinions in the comments section. With the introduction finished, let's begin the countdown. Starting off this list with number 10, I have chosen Stone Cold from 5 Nights at Freddy's World. This is the music track that plays during the final boss fights with both Scott Cawthon and Chica's Magic Rainbow. While I feel that the story itself of 5 Nights at Freddy's World is extremely lacking, which I will definitely cover whenever I get around to reviewing the games in one form or another, this theme fits perfectly for a final boss fight. It sounds very climactic and really makes the battle feel like the ending to a grand adventure. The music's sense of urgency becomes especially fitting during the fight with Chica's Magic Rainbow, where you are on a time limit to defeat the boss before it unleashes its final smash of sorts. However, one problem with this track is that its grandiose tone can feel somewhat empty when you consider that it is used to conclude a story that was, for the most part, hollow and underwhelming. Despite that, Stone Cold is a fantastically intense piece of music, perfect for any final boss battle. For number 9, I have chosen the shop theme from 5 Nights at Freddy's AR, Special Delivery. Unfortunately, this is one of 4 music tracks on this list that does not have a name applied to it, so I have had to resort to referring to it with the rather generic designation of the shop theme. As the name suggests, this is the music that plays when you visit Special Delivery's shop. I enjoy this track because of its slow, relaxing tone, a stark contrast to the high levels of tension present during encounters, where players are constantly on edge. The shop's music is honestly very similar to Just Add Water, the music that plays during blueprint mode in Pizzeria Simulator, in the sense that it provides players with a mildly rehabilitating break after an intense encounter with animatronics, while also preparing them for the next round. Interestingly, the shop's music also has a very inviting undertone, as if it is actively attempting to lure players into the shop and convince them to browse through its offer. Thankfully, I and many others have been able to resist this temptation. However, that does not stop this piece of music from being one of my favorites, hence its placement on my list. For number 8, I have chosen the title screen theme from Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. Of course, this is the track that plays during the title screen of Pizzeria Simulator, and I have placed it on this list because I enjoy its energetic and upbeat rhythm, reflective of Pizzeria Simulator's status as a Five Nights at Freddy's game disguised as a child-friendly tycoon simulator. Overall, Pizzeria Simulator's soundtrack definitely leans more in an energetic, light-hearted direction, with a few exceptions, one of which will be mentioned later on this list. While I prefer the more dark and mysterious music tracks of other games, Pizzeria Simulator's OST was still fantastic, and its title theme is an excellent representation of that. I apologize that this section was much shorter than the others. I was just struggling to find much to say about this track other than that it is a track that puts me in a good mood whenever I hear it. Originally, I had placed this track in the top 5, but it has moved down to number 8, since I found myself without much to say about it, whereas I have plenty to say about the next 7 music pieces. For number 7, I have chosen the hub theme from Curse of Dreadbear, the Halloween DLC for Five Nights at Freddy's, Help Wanted. This is one of the few original pieces of music created for Help Wanted, and one of its best at that. I enjoy this track because it fits perfectly with the season of Halloween, as it sounds very spooky, mysterious, and unnerving. This becomes especially evident when you compare the music to the hub world that it is applied to, and it fits fantastically. The low and ominous tone of the music fits very well with the eerie, dimly lit, secret-heavy farm that the main hub is set within, most especially whenever Dreadbear emerges from the lake and slowly shuffles past you towards the barn behind you. All of the hub world's other Easter eggs, such as the pirate ship in the lake, and Dreadbear and Glitch Trap on the hills, also become more effective with this music track applied. In fact, when Five Nights at Freddy's 2 was released on home consoles, Curse of Dreadbear's main hub theme was used as the game's new title screen theme, since all of the stock music in the original quadrilogy needed to be replaced when the games were ported to consoles. Despite my praises for this track, it does not exactly fit for Five Nights at Freddy's 2, and would have been far more appropriate for Five Nights at Freddy's 4, due to the similarities between it and Curse of Dreadbear. However, regardless of which game it is used in, Curse of Dreadbear's main hub theme is still an enjoyable spooky theme. For number 6, we have the only piece of stock music on this list, that being Darkness from the original Five Nights at Freddy's. Honestly, numbers 10 to 7 were fairly easy to order, but numbers 6 and onwards were extremely difficult for me to order, since these are all fantastic pieces of music. Ultimately, after much rearranging, I decided to place Darkness at number 7, mainly just because it is a stock track, taken from shockwavesound.com. This track plays during the title screen of the original Five Nights at Freddy's, and, out of all 4 stock title screen themes, I think that this is definitely the best of them. While I still enjoy the others, they all have slight issues that drag them down slightly. Five Nights at Freddy's 2's theme feels extremely repetitive. Five Nights at Freddy's 3's theme has always sounded to me as if it is trying a little too hard to sound intense and threatening, and Five Nights at Freddy's 4's theme, while still terrifying, does feel slightly unfitting for the game. On the other hand, the first game's title theme does a fantastic job of making you feel very unnerved and establishing the tone of the game. The track's very low, ominous, mysterious tone makes it both a terrifying piece of music and a perfect introduction to the world of Five Nights at Freddy's, since this will likely be the very first sound that a new player will hear upon starting the game. Additionally, the music also has a slightly haunting undertone to it, foreshadowing the supernatural backstory of the game's setting. If this list was based on how terrifying the music tracks are, then Darkness would possibly be at number 1. However, there are just a few tracks that I enjoy more, despite this being a delightfully devilish introduction to a delightfully devilish series. For number 5, I have chosen Where Dreams Die from Ultimate Custom Night. In my opinion, Five Nights at Freddy's music was at its finest during Sister Location, Pizzeria Simulator, and Ultimate Custom Night, since these games' soundtracks had more varied and engaging compositions. Just like Sister Location's Custom Night, Ultimate Custom Night has alternate music tracks that are selected at random when you start a new night, with my favorite of them being Where Dreams Die. The reason why I have chosen this track as my favorite from the game is because it stands out the most among them, since most of the other tracks all attempt a very intimidating and mysterious tone, while this piece of music still has both of those qualities and executes them perfectly. It also has a somewhat more tragic tone to it as well, especially during the beginning, which can be seen as a double meaning. On one hand, this can be seen as representative of the numerous tragedies that have occurred throughout the series, such as the murder of children before their lives could truly begin, hence the title of the music, or the killer's eternal punishment at the hands of his victims, depicted in Ultimate Custom Night. On the other hand, the tragic tone could be seen as a metaphor for the end of the series. Not a lot of people realize this, but Pizzeria Simulator and Ultimate Custom Night were really the conclusion of the original Five Nights at Freddy's story. Even though new games are still being developed, they are instead building upon an entirely new story, which many consider to be a reboot. If that is the case, then I think that Ultimate Custom Night was a perfect conclusion to the series, and this was an excellent music track to attach to the finale of one of my favorite video game franchises. For number 4, I have chosen Gradual Liquidation from Five Nights at Freddy's, Sister Location. This track plays during the title screen of Sister Location, and it is, quite possibly, my favorite title theme in the series, although Darkness is a very close second. In my opinion, this was the point where Five Nights at Freddy's music truly became phenomenal. The reason why I have placed this track so high is because I really enjoy its chaotic, mechanical, mysterious tone, perfectly foreshadowing the tone and setting of Sister Location. I feel that a majority of Sister Location's OST captures the game's tone excellently, hence why it is one of my favorite soundtracks in the series, and Gradual Liquidation is a perfect example of that, second only to another Sister Location track that I will cover later. It just fits so naturally with the constantly shifting title screen. Interestingly, a lot of people have reported that they have faintly heard the phrase "help me" within the track at several intervals. If this is indeed true, then that is some excellent and subtle foreshadowing to one of the game's plot twists, which also applies to the track's name, but to a lesser extent. Concerning the music's rhythm, I enjoy how the pace gradually becomes faster and more chaotic as the music progresses, before finally ending with a quiet, but sinister piano piece. While both Darkness and Gradual Liquidation are phenomenal title themes and easy contenders for my favorite, I have ultimately decided to place Gradual Liquidation higher, mainly due to its more varied composition. Now, let's finally move on to the top 3 the music tracks that I consider to be the best of the entire series. For number 3, I have chosen the battle theme from Five Nights at Freddy's World. Of course, this is the theme that plays during regular battles in World, and it is definitely my favorite theme in the entire game. This is very similar to Pizzeria Simulator's title theme, in the sense that it always manages to put me in a good mood whenever I hear it. I enjoy how this track manages to sound energetic and bombastic, but soothing and relaxing at the same time. Some people may complain that the track does not sound intimidating or intense enough for a battle theme, and, while I slightly agree with that, I still really enjoy this track. When I first got into the franchise, I originally thought that this was the main theme of World, and, while the actual title theme is quite pleasant and enjoyable, I honestly think that the battle theme would be a better fit for World's overall theme, since it is the track that most people would associate with the game. Despite my praises, I will admit that nostalgia could be a factor in this track's high placement, since I had gotten into Five Nights at Freddy's around the time of Update 2 of World, so there is a high chance that the game's battle theme could move down a few slots. Despite that, this is still a fantastic piece of Five Nights at Freddy's music, but it is nothing compared to the top 2. For number 2, just barely missing the number 1 slot, I have chosen Nowhere to Run from Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. This is the track that plays during Henry's speech at the end of Pizzeria Simulator, and this was a fantastic track to close out not just the game, but also the entire original Five Nights at Freddy's story. Like I mentioned at number 5, even though new games are still being made, the original Five Nights at Freddy's story did technically end with Pizzeria Simulator and Ultimate Custom Night, with the new games telling a completely new story. Getting back to Nowhere to Run, this track perfectly matches the tone and structure of the scene that it is applied to. For the first few seconds, the track sounds tragic and mysterious, fitting for the resolution of a tragedy that began several decades ago. Then, the music slowly becomes more and more intense until it climatically drops into a briefly triumphant tone as Henry sets fire to the pizzeria and the animatronics burn, enforcing that this is the long-awaited conclusion to the series. Finally, the track remains somber and tragic, as Henry apologizes to his daughter for her death and possession of the puppet. In the game itself, the track cuts off at around the 2 minutes and 5 seconds mark, but the remaining 55 seconds of the track actually contain some hidden details that indicate what occurred off-screen, mainly after the 2 minutes and 13 seconds mark. The first hidden sound, which could actually be heard in the in-game segment, resembles a fire alarm, confirming that the fire is spreading rapidly through the pizzeria. Secondly, and more interestingly, you can actually hear faint thuds and loud banging sounds. The thuds may come from the animatronics falling to the ground as the fire neutralizes their remnant and sets their spirits free. Meanwhile, there are 2 possible explanations for the loud banging sounds. First of all, they come from Scraptrap as he attempts to escape from the pizzeria before finally succumbing to the fire, which is supported by the bangs gradually becoming fainter and fainter. Secondly, the bangs could instead signify the collapse of the building as the fire ravages its interior. Regardless, these are excellent details that really add to the suspense. Overall, Nowhere to Run is one of the most excellently crafted music tracks in the entire franchise, as it manages to tell its story without any visuals or words, and combines several tones, from triumphant to tragic to mysterious, and I honestly could not have asked for a better way to close out the story. Overall, this track is phenomenal, and yet there is still one more music track to go. However, before I reveal number 1, I would like to quickly cover some honorable mentions. While this list was fairly easy for me to put together, there are still a few tracks that I consider to be excellent. As to not prolong this video's length, I will now play excerpts from all of the honorable mentions in no particular order.
everybody. You ready to have a good time? I know I am. Cause it's Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. For kids, it's #1. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, where fantasy meets fun.
With the honorable mentions covered, let's finally move on to #1. And finally, #1, my favorite music track in the entire Five Nights at Freddy's franchise is Watch Your Six from Five Nights at Freddy's Sister Location. This is the track that plays during the final boss fight within the private room in Sister Location, and is commonly referred to as Inad's theme by fans. It was an excruciatingly difficult decision for me as to whether I should place Watch Your Six or Nowhere to Run at #1. However, by a razor-thin difference, I eventually decided on Watch Your Six. While Nowhere to Run may be an objectively superior track, I ultimately prefer Watch Your Six because, to me, it has practically become synonymous with not just the game and scene that is applied to, but also the entire Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. The track sounds creepy, intense, and mysterious all at the same time, all adjectives that can be accurately used to describe a majority of the series, to the point where this track would perhaps be an excellent candidate for a Five Nights at Freddy's anthem. Concerning its use for the final encounter with Inad, the track does a fantastic job at conveying the mystery surrounding Inad and the private room itself. Upon a first playthrough, a player will likely have no prior knowledge of the private room's existence, so the revelation of a hidden section of the facility would spark a sense of surprise and curiosity, especially with several major lore reveals. Secondly, the reveal of the Funtime animatronics' motivations and the terrifying result would also spark a feeling of terror and intrigue. All of these potential emotions are conveyed perfectly through the music track's slow and daunting tone, coupled with the constant spikes in tension. Additionally, the track's mechanical and futuristic undertones make it a fitting representation of the overall tone and setting of Sister Location, among several equally efficient contenders. Also, an interesting detail that you may have missed is that the track's name, Watch Your Six, is actually a military term that means watch your back, which I think is a nice detail. Overall, its unnerving and mysterious tone are what make Watch Your Six from Sister Location my favorite music track in the entire Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. Thank you for watching this video. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I decided to cover this topic because it is one that I rarely see covered, if at all. Since I, for once, had an original video idea, I wanted to quickly make it before somebody else beat me to it. Originally, I had plans to make a top 10 Five Nights at Freddy's characters who need a voice video, but that has already been made by somebody else, so I decided that I was taking no chances with this idea. Unfortunately, this decision has slightly interrupted my video schedule, but it shall now resume as planned. Also, I would like to apologize if any of my explanations throughout this video are poorly explained. Like I mentioned earlier, I am not an expert on music, so I was unable to break down the structure of each track in detail. Instead, I simply described my opinions on each track, which actually turned out to be longer and harder than I had initially expected. Moving away from the topic of this video, I would like to address my current video schedule. I have now decided that Ideas for Special Delivery Mechanics, Part 2 will be my next video, even though a majority of people voted for it to be the last planned video to be made. I have made this decision because I do not think that it would be fair for voters to have to wait for almost a month to receive the video that they voted for. Following that video will be the Transformers video, the topic of which I have decided to be a 20 obscure Transformers characters, and the finale of sorts to this round of videos will be a 255 Nights at Freddy's Facts. Finally, I promise that, when I reach 10,000 subscribers, I will officially do a voice reveal. With all of my points addressed, that will be all for this video. Please like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to share your own opinions in the comments section, and please subscribe to my channel if you would like to stay up to date with my newest uploads. Thank you for watching.